Tender Portals Made Easy is one of the many workshops that we deliver on behalf of the Supplier Development Programme. In 2014, we've delivered somewhere in the region of 35 workshops, and this year to date, we've delivered about 20. From the introductory level 1 workshops right through to the series of workshops for the experienced bidder to make your bidding better, to try and help you increase your strike rate when it comes to bidding for public sector work. There's an awful lot of workshops going on. Sign up to SDP and come along and learn what you can to make your interaction with the public sector procurement sphere a better experience. So, can SMEs really compete in public procurement? There is a feeling with a lot of SMEs that it's kind of stitched up by the big boys and it's a hard nut to crack. Yes, there are difficulties in getting started. There's work needs to be done on both sides of the fence, both in terms of you as a supplier and the public sector as a buyer. There are lots of rules and regulations that are in place and are coming into place which will make life hopefully easier in the long run for everybody. The underlying design, if you like, of public procurement is that it's open, transparent and objective. That's the three underlying tenets of public procurement. The buyers have to make sure that everybody now gets a fair crack of the whip. It's no longer the case where people can just let contracts to the people they know. The quality of the material which is disseminated to sellers has to be good, it has to be improved, and it is getting better. Historically, it was a bit patchy. It's now over the piece, pretty good, I would say. There are processes being put in place now to alleviate the administrative burden. That's one of the big bugbears of suppliers. The amount of things that you have to do, the number of hurdles that you have to jump over in order to compete, that is gradually being reduced, and it is, again, becoming easier for SMEs, particularly the very small companies, to become involved. Nothing's perfect yet, but we are all moving in the right direction. So, in terms of SMEs getting a fair crack of the whip, if you like, if we look at this, typically across the EU, 42% by value of all the tenders go to SMEs. In the UK, it is slightly lower than that. In Scotland, there are, I won't go through all the details here. The things to notice there are the three sub-bullet points in the middle. Since 2008, when PCS started, there have been somewhere in the region of 8,000 ODU notices, that's high-value contracts, let through PCS. Somewhere in the region of twice that, 16,000, what they call website notices or sub-ODU threshold contract notices published on PCS. And somewhere in the region of 30,000 quick quotes. Quick quotes is a relatively new mechanism whereby small and low value contracts can be let quickly. It's a reasonably easy way into getting started in public sector procurement if that's where you're wanting to go. And as you see there, 30,000 quick quotes have been let, most of them in the last 2.5, 3 years. So it's a huge area, there's a huge amount of money, huge amount of work to be won there. And that, in certain respects, that's part of the problem. There's so much work out there. How do you decide what to go for? Bidders, you need to get smarter in order to compete effectively. There's no point in looking at all the opportunities that are out there and then deciding we're going to go for everything, because you're going to end up doing nothing well. So you need to step back and figure out exactly what you're going to do. It's a big marketplace. It's not an easy marketplace, don't get me wrong. You need to be better organised. A lot of people think, oh, it's just a quick tender, I need to dash off, and I'll do it 2-3 days before the deadline. You do that, and 99 times out of 100, you're going to fail. It's going to be a waste of effort. You need to be more confident. You need to know what you do well, and promote that effectively. You need to cut out the mistakes. The number of people who submit documents with mistakes in it, it just makes you look unprofessional. So take time to review your documents before you submit them. You need to learn how to pre-qualify. If you are starting from scratch, you could be up against hundreds, if not thousands, of competitors. If you can pre-qualify to the second stage of a tender process, you will be down to maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 15 at most. So it's important that you learn how to get through that first hurdle. And you need to write better bids. Historically, we've been involved in public procurement for 15 years. And back in the beginning, when all the rules and regulations started to come in, people were able to win tenders with scores typically of 80–85%. Nowadays, 90–95% might not even get you a look in. So you need to be good. You need to be able to write good bids. How do you access all this information? Well, it's through PCS initially. Now, most of you here will probably know, hopefully you'll be registered on PCS. It's the de facto source now in Scotland of all public procurement opportunities. But it is so much more than that. Yes, you can go on there, you can see the tender opportunities, you can register for alerts, you can get all the information delivered to your email box every day. It's great, but you can use it as a great source of market intelligence as well. This might sound a bit counterintuitive, but if you go on to PCS and look at past contract notices, you will see who has won contracts in the past. If you're at the smaller end of the market, you might be looking at subcontract opportunities. So who won contracts in your sphere of work? Can you go and get subcontract work off of them? Look at when contracts are coming up for renewal. There's a big thing now, the big push by the Scottish Government to have all, certainly local authorities, and that will then cascade down to the smaller public bodies, to publish a tender wave plan. Now that will give everybody a view on every public body's tender proposals over the next year. Now obviously, stuff that's maybe 6 months, a year down the line is not quite so firm in terms of its time scale and scope, but closer in, the closer in you get, the firmer the opportunities become, so you can start preparing well in advance. You don't have to wait for the contract notice to come out in order to start putting your bids together. You can be prepared well in advance. This is just a quick slide in there to let you see the sort of scale of opportunities that you're looking at. The 111 and £170,000, they are central and local government thresholds for OJU notices. What that means is if we take the £172,000, if you're a Scottish local authority, if you're buying something that the contract value is over that threshold, not only will the opportunity be published on PCS, it will also go out to OJU. Now, what that means is you are suddenly fishing in a much bigger pond. There's a lot of bigger, not necessarily bigger, but there's a lot more players out there will see that opportunity, be aware of that. That's not to say that non-Scottish companies can register on PCS. There are a few. There's not that many, to be honest, but there are some non-Scottish companies who are already registered on PCS to pick up Scottish only or Scottish advertised work. The interesting bit here is the £50,000 threshold at the bottom. Historically, all the local authorities had different standing orders, so you needed to know where you were selling, what the standing order was in terms of going out to quote for the local authorities. That's now being standardised through the the newly introduced Procurement Reform Bill. It's now the Procurement Reform Act. And what that says is now that at £50,000, below that threshold, the public bodies will go out to quick quote. Okay? Now, don't have time to go into quick quotes in any details, but you go into PCS, register, set up your profiles for quick quotes, and then talk to the local authorities. It's important that you promote yourself to the public bodies. It's not good enough for you just to say, I've got my supplier finder profile set up in PCS, the work will roll in. It doesn't happen that way. There are an awful lot of suppliers out there. You need to make all your potential clients aware that you are on quick quotes, that you're ready to pick up work through that channel. So, I mentioned the Procurement Reform Bill. This is a fairly large piece of work which has now become an Act of Parliament, so it's now in force, and it's just recently been passed into law, and public bodies now have until April next year to put in place the requirements of the Act. It came out of sustainable procurement. It's all about putting new processes in place. I won't go into it in any great detail. If any of you have trouble going to sleep at night, then you can download the Act itself and read it, and that should solve your problems. Part of the regulations which the Procurement Reform Bill talk about is this transposition of directives. Now, it becomes very jargonistic here, but in essence, what it's doing is it's putting into local law the EU directives. And again, these are even worse to read. I will gloss over that and talk about the main gist of it. These sectors here, if anybody is involved in supplying goods, works or services in these service categories, it's important to understand impact of the transposition of directives. These service categories used to be what were called Schedule B categories, which meant that work in these areas could be commissioned. That's no longer the case. All these service categories, work now has to be fully tendered. So in the past, if you were just expecting people to phone you up and say, can you do this, can you do that, if you're doing any of these service categories, then be prepared for a shock. You're going to have to go through the full tendering process with everybody else. That's the biggest change probably that's going to come out of the Procurement Reform Bill if you're in these sectors. So, in terms of the hot topics that are going about at the moment, there's quick quotes which I've mentioned. It's a very low overhead route to get into public procurement. Community benefit is a big thing at the moment. If you are a buyer letting a contract over £4 million, then you have to at least consider putting a community benefit clause into the tender. And you have to have a good reason for excluding it. Okay? Now, what does community benefit mean? It can mean a whole range of things, different things for different people. It can be as simple as we're going to sponsor the local junior football team at a very basic level. But it can be as much as you can talk about developing the local workforce, taking on apprentices. Don't forget, if you're talking about developing workforce and things like that, don't forget your own workforce. Most people, when they're writing tenders, they think, oh, I'll take on an apprentice or I'll take on somebody who's been long-term unemployed. It's equally valid to say we're going to upskill our own workforce. That gets you a tick in the box as well. Okay? Sustainability. That's another big buzzword at the moment. Sustainability, yeah, it's all about being green and doing things better and more efficiently. It's also, in the wider sense, about maintaining the sustainability of the supply base. Again, there's this perception in the procurement world that it's all about driving the price down. Price is only one element of it. There's the cost of things. Now, when you're submitting a bid, you're submitting a price with that bid. It's important that you can get across the fact that your proposal provides a better total cost of ownership or whole life cycle cost. If you can provide that, that will help your bid, certainly. In terms of being sustainable, there's no point in a buyer saying, I've got 5 bids on the table, they're all at, 4 of them are at £100, and I've got one supplier there that's saying they can, on the face of it, they can do the same thing for £20. It's not going to work. Chances are that's a suicide bid. That can be thrown out, quite legitimately, as being unreasonably low, but also that there's no point in working with these companies if the chances are over the period of the contract they're going to go out of business, because what that's doing is it's shrinking the size of the supply base. Buyers want a big pool to fish from. They want to see what the market can provide. Okay, sometimes you might not feel that when you are bidding. You think, oh, they just want the cheapest price. It's not like that anymore. Okay. I was going to talk about the standardised pre-qualification questionnaire, which is still sort of on the horizon. We're getting there. I'll not mention PCS tender because that's coming up in another slot. And the last point here, the standstill period and feedback. It's important that if you are tendering, that you seek feedback. Now, I wasn't going to ask for questions during the presentation, but I'd just like a quick show of hands. Anybody here who has tendered for work and been successful and sought feedback? Even if you are successful when you win work, it's important that you find out how good, bad or indifferent your bid was. Because the next time you go to bid for work, all those people who were unsuccessful will have learnt their lessons and will be better. So you need to be better as well, even though you won. The temptation, I know, is great to say, you get the letter in, yeah, we won, start talking to the client and go on with work. Take a step back, get the feedback and figure out how you can get better. And all that has to be done during the standstill period. Okay, it's all laid out on a statutory basis. So this is just some feedback that we have had from the workshops that have been run for SDP. We've run them right across the country, from as far north as Aberdeen to as far south as Dumfries, right across the Central Belt, Perth, Stirling, places like that. I'll not go through that in any great detail, just leave it there. In terms of what to do next, what should you be doing? You need to get involved. There's no point in just sitting back. The opportunities won't land on your lap without some effort on your part. You need to go and talk to the local authorities. Make them aware of what you can do and how much of it you can do. Understand your own capability and capacity. Okay? Attend events. Now you're all here, so that's a tick in the box already. Bid for relevant and appropriate work. As I said earlier on, there are way too many opportunities out there to bid for everything. So you need to become smarter and more selective in what you bid for. Develop a bid, no bid strategy for your involvement in the public sector. Learn how to pre-qualify. Understand what is required of you to go over that first hurdle. You need to develop your bid tactics. Understand how you're going to bid. Understand that and develop your bidding capability. Is it something that one person is going to do on their own, or is it something that is going to be spread across your company or organisation? Prepare what you can in advance. There's a lot of things that you can have ready to go. All your statutory documents, your policies and procedures, your accounts, your CVs, case studies, all these things can be ready. There's nothing worse than starting to put together a proposal and think, oh, we need to get a CV for Fred and for Sarah, and they come in and they look different, and it just doesn't tie together as a cohesive document. So have all these things ready to go in a standardised format. And if at first you don't succeed, don't keep bashing your head against the same wall, but learn from your mistakes. Get feedback. Quite often, you will ask for feedback and you'll be told your score was, the winning score was, and that's it. Probe them a bit deeper. Try and get more feedback on a, if you like, section by section basis on your proposal. Where was I good? Where was I not so good? Where can I improve? Most organisations now will provide you relatively good feedback. Okay? And just finally, that's contact details for ourselves, SCMG, who have delivered these programmes on behalf of the Supplier Development Programme.